Hey guys, it's Dasha. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome to this very embarrassing video where I'm gonna go over every single book that I at some point have started, gotten a chunk of the way through, put it down, and never read again. I DNF books. I don't have a problem DNFing books, but often I also pick books up and realize that I'm not in the right mood for it or I'm not feeling it, put it down, and then never come back to them because I have that negative association with them of like, oh, I started this at some point, I put it down, and now it's like taunting me. And I want to go over these and kind of talk to you about why I'd put them down, and you guys can let me know if any of them are worth prioritizing, or if you think maybe I won't like them based on my reading taste, or just if they're maybe worth prioritizing because they're just so good and you love them. You can also trash them. Absolutely. Go right ahead. I guess this is like a mini Trash My TBR, except it's like books I've already started and you're allowed to say nice things. I want to start with the first one that is still very intimidating. I have House of Leaves by Mark Danielewski. This is a massive horror book that's in like mixed media. It's about a family that moves into a house and the inside is bigger than the outside, and you're following like a person discovering a documentary about that family. It's very convoluted. As you can see, I even tabbed it because I liked a certain passage in it, and I got about 60 pages in. The thing is, 60 pages in this book is like an hour and a half of reading. And normally my pace is a lot faster than that. This book is just so dense. And I think that's what put me off of it. It's just one day I put it down and I was like, I don't have the mental energy for this or the time for this. And I still have not picked it back up because I know just how daunting of a task it is. I am hoping to get to it this year, but I truly don't know because it's just such a scary task. So the next book I want to talk about is The Kiss of Deception by Mary Pearson. This is a young adult fantasy, the first book in a trilogy, following a young woman who is set to be married to someone that she really doesn't want to, so she ends up running away, and two men are sent after her. One is the prince that she was supposed to marry, hoping to find out why she ran. He has his own like demons that he's battling, and the other person is an assassin. And first of all, this premise really intrigued me, and as far as like young adult series goes, this one seems to have overall pretty positive reviews as opposed to the kind of more mixed reviews that a lot of these like YA fantasy series get lately. So I was really intrigued, and I have the audiobook. I picked it up for like $2.99 on an Apple book sale, and I was sitting at home without any internet for a couple weeks because they screwed me over at my new apartment, and I was like, why don't I try it? And I got a chunk of the way in. Like, I experienced a solid amount of the story, and then I guess because I'd gotten internet and I was like caught up with school, I put it down and I just never picked it back up. But truly, this is one that like I'd like to get back to because I think it's intriguing. I didn't love the writing style, but I thought that it was still like entertaining and engaging, and I love the premise, and I was hoping to see it like be very well executed, and I was already intrigued by the characters. They seem to have a little bit of depth, especially the prince. So I was really hoping I was gonna like it, and then yeah, like school hit, everything else kind of happened all at once, and I put it down and I never picked it back up. I, like I said, only started on audiobook. If you think the audiobook, if you've tried it and like it's not that good, let me know and I'll just pick up like a copy from the library or something. But I actually didn't mind the audiobook so far. So the next one is also a young adult fantasy. It is Lore by Alexandra Bracken, and this is a kind of Grecian-inspired mythological fantasy set in the modern world where Greek gods are sent down to Earth as punishment and are given 7 days to be mortal, and these like famous bloodlines are able to hunt those gods down, and if they manage to kill one, they get their powers. I got the first like few chapters as an arc on NetGalley, and I read it and reviewed it, and I thought it was like a really solid start. Now that reviews have come out, they're not great, and knowing some of the things I know from having read a few chapters, it's like I can see why it would not be fantastic, but I love the premise and I'm hoping that it really delivers on that. The negative reviews have been really putting me off, which is why I haven't picked it up. I put it on hold on ebook at the library, and every time the hold comes in, I just keep pushing it back because I guess I'm nervous. But like I probably should just read it at some point because I like the premise. The next book I want to talk about is There Will Come a Darkness by Katie Rose Poole. This is also a young adult fantasy inspired by Greek and Roman mythology and the culture. I have not heard a lot of things about this one, but the things that I have heard are generally pretty positive. The thing is, when I started reading this, there were several different point of views like right away, and they weren't intriguing enough to me, so I put this down and kind of put it out of my mind. It's not that I'm not interested in this, I just didn't really feel anything for the characters, and I've read from a few of their point of views, and I even got to like circling back to some, and I just generally didn't feel any kind of intrigue. But the fact that this book is so vague and the few reviews that I have seen have been positive still make me interested in wanting to pick it back up eventually. It's just not very high on the priority list. The next one is super embarrassing because it is like a beloved classic, and it is Beloved by Toni Morrison. Pun intended. This is a classic work of literary fiction following a runaway slave and her children. There's like a haunting. Honestly, the writing style in this, when I did start it, was just so draining to read. And it was beautiful, don't get me wrong, but it just took way too much of my brain power to read. And this was when I was like in school. I'd read it like in the middle of a busy period, and I just generally could not make my way through it. I would love to pick it back up. I got a chunk of the way into, like I was like 40% in, but I could not tell you anything that happened because I wasn't absorbing any of it. My friend Gabe absolutely loves Toni Morrison. He's read most of her work, I believe, and he said that he might buddy read Beloved with me. He's read it before, obviously, but he might reread it at the same time as I'm reading it, and I think that might be easier, honestly, because I'm a dumb bitch and getting through Beloved was such a hassle, but now that I'm out of school, it might be a little bit easier to get through. The next book is We Are the Ants by Sean David Hutchinson. This is a young adult kind of contemporary with a sci-fi twist where a young man finds himself abducted by aliens and they give him an ultimatum. He has this big red button and he has to decide whether in like 163 days he wants to press it and save the world from blowing up. And the reason this is such a dilemma for him is because his life's not going well. He's facing a lot of kind of typical teen issues, but also a lot of larger issues, and it's just a lot of stress for him, and he's going through those feelings of like, what if humans just aren't meant to be here? I started reading this for a readathon because it is not my typical read, but I was still intrigued by this kind of contemporary sci-fi spin, and honestly, I hated the writing style. I did not gel with it at all, so I put it down, and this one I'm considering not picking back up because I feel like the book would have been much more impactful on me if I had read it as a teenager in high school, but at this stage in my life, the book kind of didn't matter to me. I can see how it can be super important to someone that is still in high school and dealing with these feelings, especially someone that's part of the LGBTQ plus community, because that is what the main character is a part of. I believe he is gay, but I'm not 100% sure. It's been a little while. And so I feel like this book could be really, really important for someone in that age category, but this is one of those books that I'm really considering not continuing because I didn't love it, and it's definitely not intended for me as an audience, but I still really like the premise. Bro, that's really annoying. As soon as I turn the camera back on, the vacuuming stops and someone starts mowing their lawn. I love living downtown. The next book I want to talk about is Sin Eater by Megan Campisi. So this is an adult historical novel with this fantastical element. Back in the day in England, there used to actually be these women called sin eaters, and when someone was dying or dead, the sin eater would come and eat a piece of food that symbolized that person's sins that they'd committed in their life, and it was believed that this person would basically imbibe the sins that the other person had committed through the food and take that load off of them as the deceased went up into heaven. And so you're following someone in this world who is becoming a sin eater to get out of a prison sentence or maybe a death sentence, I can't remember. And so she has to learn what this entails, but I guess in this world it is literal, this symbolic sin eating. And I just remember that I found this quite interesting. It is a short book, so everything happens in a pretty quick pace, and I'd love to maybe pick this back up for a readathon or something because again, it's quick and fast, and it was really simple but nice writing. I enjoyed it enough. I just wasn't like super interested when I started, but I think if I'm in the right mood, I could really, really enjoy this. I don't see anyone talking about this, and I do love finding an underrated gem, so hopefully this ends up being good. But yeah, I got like a chunk of the way through, like the story had really started, and I put it down. I can't remember why I even put it down. I think, again, just got busy with life and stuff, but this is one that I would like to come back to. The next one I want to talk about is The Library of the Unwritten by A.J. Hackwith. This is an adult fantasy novel about a librarian in hell. So when unfinished stories are left forgotten if the author dies or just moves on to other things, these stories get sent down to Hell's library, and you're following Claire, I believe, who is the librarian there, and one of these stories escapes and comes back to Earth to haunt the author. And it seemed super fun and interesting, but when I started, I guess right off the bat, the story took a turn I didn't expect. And I just kind of got disinterested, but I still would like to read it because I think it's a really cool concept. I've heard nothing but praise for this series because now there's 2 books, I believe, and I've just heard fantastic things, and the people that love it really love it. And the premise is just so unique, and I like this idea of seeing these different books that are stuck in hell. And if I'm not mistaken, there's hell from different mythologies as well, which is always a buzzword for me. So I think I really just maybe picked it up at the bad time when I wasn't in the mood for stories to take like turns I didn't like. But this is absolutely a book that I would like to continue because it seems so up my alley. The next one on this list is House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin A. Craig. I believe this is a young adult retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses fairy tale, which I'm not familiar with, but basically, from what I gathered from the beginning of this book, the family is cursed. All the daughters in this family, there's like 12 of them, they all start dying in quick succession, and I really love the atmosphere of this. It's set on this like mansion by the waterside. The family is really like tied to the water, the salt water, and there's a lot of rituals around it, and it seemed like a really interesting and beautiful take. Like, from what I remember, this book was just haunting in the way it was written. But I think I just, again, wasn't in the right mood for some reason, and I just put it down, but I kind of am still interested. I remember this was huge on BookTube a couple of years ago when it came out. This was everywhere, and overall it got pretty decent reviews. I don't think it ever became anyone's like favorite book, but it was really well received, and I still would like to pick it up eventually because from what I read, I was pretty intrigued. The next book I want to talk about is The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. This is a collection of short stories set in the Witcher universe, which is an adult expansive fantasy about the Witcher, Geralt, who is a monster hunter, essentially. From what I'd heard, people said to start with the short stories to get a taste of the world and writing style, so I did, and I was not gelling with it. So this is going to be a very unique case where I'm not going to go back to this book specifically right away in the series. I think I'm really going to go to book number 1 and start from there and use the short stories after to kind of supplement if I love the series, because I feel like starting with short stories when you don't know the character, like the main world components, is not a good idea. I don't know, I'm not a short story person overall, so that probably doesn't help. But I just wasn't vibing with the collection of stories. I didn't love the stories because I knew that they were so short. Stuff was just happening at a different pace. I think for fantasy, short story is not the right format. So I would come back to it if I like this series, but I'm going to instead start with a different book in the series. I think that's how I'm going to proceed. Because I'm excited for the Witcher series. I have the video game download. I'm just finishing up another game at the moment, and I'd love to watch the TV show, and I really want to read the books because it seems beloved and it seems like right up my alley in terms of everything fantasy. So I'd love to get to it, just not starting with The Last Wish. Next, I want to talk about Stephen King's Under the Dome. This is an adult kind of post-apocalyptic novel. You're following a bunch of people in a small town, and one day this massive clear bubble descends over the town, like planes crash into it, no one can leave it. It is just an impenetrable wall. So you're following the people in this town. I still have my bookmark in here. I got 113 pages in and then never picked it back up. I think my issue with this was that I hadn't read a ton of King up until that point, and although this premise is one of my favorites from him, I think I need to start with some of his horror and then go into his non-horror stuff. You could probably classify this kind of as horror, but it's more sci-fi in my opinion, and almost more of a character study because the people in this that you follow, you get like full backstory and very like detailed descriptions of what they're doing when this bubble descends. So I think it's definitely a book best left for A, when I have like a shit ton of time, and B, just when I'm not in the mood for anything horror from King. I think that was the other thing. I hadn't read a lot of horror at that point, period. So I was kind of like, you know what, I need something a little bit more intense. But I did like what I'd read from this. I did like that it was kind of character focused. It was a little bit different. And I do love Stephen King's characters, so I had no doubt that it's gonna be good from that angle. It's just not the story I wanted at the point that I picked it up, but I am still excited for this. The next book I want to talk about is one that if you've been around for a little bit, you've seen on my channel before because I can't seem to get around to it. A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, an adult literary novel about a group of roommates after university. It's depressing, it is torture porn, some people say. It's just a lot, but it is a beloved book. It is a beautiful book, apparently. This one I got about, I can't remember, 130, 150 pages in, but I was reading it during the holidays and I just was not in the mood to be like major depressive during the holidays. So I put it down and I have not picked it back up yet, but I still really want to. It's on my list for this year because I just would really like to get to it. It's just, it sits there and it's still inviting to me. I just haven't found the right time for it, but I promise I'll get around to it. The length of it doesn't even, well, that's a lie. The length of it scares me a little bit because it's like, I can read 800-page fantasy books, no problem, but I feel like such intense contemporary character studies are gonna be a bit different. I don't know, but I still really do want to experience this one. The next book is The Night Stalker. This is a story of Richard Ramirez, of his life and his crimes. I can't remember the author, but of course I'll flash a photo up here and it'll have the author. This is a massive fucking book, okay? This is a big book, and when I started it, I was just like, I wasn't super into nonfiction as much as I am now, and I wanted to get through other ones first, rather than sit down and read this like 900-page tome. It was very well written. It was extremely detailed and fascinating. I, like most basic white woman, I love a good serial killer story. I love a good true crime story, and I absolutely am like interested in this. It's just so fucking long, and I just didn't have the mental capacity to read a book that long about Richard Ramirez. But now that I'm back into nonfiction at like a more, I guess, consistent pace, I think I'm gonna try to pick this one up maybe in 2022. Next one is also a nonfiction book. It is The Sixth Extinction. So this is basically a story of just natural selection and how different species go in and out of extinction. So I definitely wanted to pick this one up because it is a more like biological book. It's more science-based, and I don't read a ton of those. I tend to stick a lot to historical ones. And even though I'd heard mixed reviews, I was still kind of excited for it. But when I started it, it had this massive chapter at the beginning focusing on this like frog, and I don't know, I just wasn't feeling it. This is another one of those that I'm like really putting low on the priority list because of how much I didn't gel with the beginning of it, but I still kind of want to read it because I do think it's an interesting topic. So I don't know, this is definitely one of those that like, if you've read it, let me know what you thought, because I really don't know where I stand. The reviews I've seen have been mixed, and the beginning was just not it for me. Final book I'm going to talk about is The Good Daughter by Karen Slaughter. This is an adult thriller about a woman who in her past suffered a terrible tragedy. Her and her sister were forced into the woods at gunpoint. One of them ran, the other one was left behind, and it's kind of very ambiguous as to what happened to them. So you're following one of them later on as she becomes an attorney, and her town where she grew up starts experiencing these horrible things again. It's kind of bringing up all these past traumas. I got like a solid way in. Man, I must have gotten like 150, 160 pages in, and I quite enjoyed it. I've never read a Karen Slaughter before, but I've heard that they're quite gruesome and definitely very dark, but I liked it. I like dark books, and I was enjoying it. I don't remember why I put it down. I don't know if it's because I got something new and I was like, ooh, shiny, and then I started reading that instead, but I put this one down and I never picked it back up, and I would really like to. I think I'm gonna try to get to this one this year because I want to unhaul some books, and I'm gonna unhaul all my thrillers once I read them, because I don't buy thrillers anymore because I feel like once you read them, you know what's gonna happen. Why would you keep them? And this is definitely one of those I want to get off my shelf, but I absolutely want to read it first because I am very much looking forward to trying Karen Slaughter's works. I know this and Pretty Girls are like two of her best known ones, and I'm excited to see what the fuss is all about. But yeah, I put this down. I got like a solid way into, and I put it down, and I'm itching to pick it back up at some point. That was it. I have a few other books that like I started, but I genuinely didn't get enough of the way in to talk about them. So I'm not going to go over those here, but yeah, let me know if you have read these, what you thought of them. Part of the reason for making this is because I want feedback, which ones to prioritize, which ones to maybe even kick off my TBR. So please let me know. My social media is linked down below. You guys can always come talk to me there. And other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!